Hey there folks, Mark from Spectrum Pulse here, and today we have from Olivia Rodrigo, Guts. You know, thinking back on it, I was remarkably charitable to Olivia Rodrigo's debut album, Sour. Not because it was bad or it doesn't hold up, I'm still mostly pleased with that album and the review, but I think some of it felt like a microcosm of that moment in summer 2021. A new Gen Z pop star where despite some very obvious influences and shaky production, her being a strong theatrical presence with better writing than I expected allowed the teenage melodrama arc to feel pretty well realized, and more importantly, relatable to the target audience. But I knew that Guts was going to be the bigger test, the follow-through that would highlight growth or maturity in her sound, especially with some, let's call them shaky lead-off singles. And yet I'll be damned if she doesn't, for the most part, get there, as overall I would call this an improvement over Sour. Now, some of this is just a shift in how the relatability is being framed. If Sour was the high school album, Guts is the first year or two of college, where Olivia Rodrigo has more autonomy and control, especially over the messier relationships, and that just makes the storytelling much more interesting. Not just in her response to getting gaslit on Logical, or messy breakups on The Grudge, or frustrated quasi-homoerotic jealousy on Lacy, but in the moral ambiguity of having more agency and then making bad decisions that feel emotionally true, like on Bad Idea Right or Get 'Em Back, especially when juxtaposed with some tangible Gen Z self-aware irony on how all this looks like against the choppy but charmingly bouncy grooves of Love is Embarrassing. And you know, if this album stayed just in that thematic scope, it might have actually worked better, but then we get the broader cuts that are trying to place Olivia Rodrigo in the context of the all-American girl pop star, and I don't think this album has the pretensions to really sell that level of heft. Now, on the one hand, that's actually a good thing, as Rodrigo is juxtaposing a lot of societal expectations with who she actually is on songs like Making the Bed. That only helps her relatability, especially on Teenage Dream, but on the other hand, it means the attempts at grander theatricality can feel increasingly flimsy, where I would actually argue Vampire is a really poor choice of a lead-off single. I don't find it representative of this album at all. Now this leads into the execution, because theatrical power was a major weapon in Olivia Rodrigo's arsenal, and her twist to go for more soft focus, husky, more boy genius inspired vocal textures, it feels like they're underselling her, but on the flip side, she's also pushing towards much harder, bratty 90s and early 2000s pop rock, and it's a much better fit, complete with that old fuzzy vocal filter, which might not be, and the production is a lot more convincing and robust this time around, especially with the guitars finally getting up some convincing muscle, the bass line sounding a lot meatier, and the drums having even more crashing presence, even if the mixing is a little blockier than I would prefer. Now the sequencing's also a little wonky, it doesn't feel nearly as ballad heavy as Sour was, but I'm not always sure it manages its momentum that well, especially on the first half. I think the second half is much better. But outside of that, Guts, I would say, avoids the sophomore slump and shows Olivia Rodrigo growing into a more interesting, nuanced, and impactful artist. Maybe nothing with the immediate magic of her best singles like Driver's License or Good For You, but with a few deep cuts, I can see getting closer. Again, she's not quite great yet, but I can hear her getting there, and that's worth checking out. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. If you guys want to see more reviews, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'm actually legit curious to see how this album compares with how a lot of people felt about Sour, given all the hubbub and hype there was around that project back in 2021, especially in the different pop landscape of 2023. But beyond that, if you guys want to get albums on my schedule, an overloaded schedule, link to my Patreon's right over there. And as always, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.